Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Cut Rate Commander, the series in which we take a look at low-price commanders and make budget decks with them. My name is Grazzet and today we'll be looking at the Orc multi-class specialist, Burakos Party Leader. Before we continue, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you like this content and would like me to continue making more videos like this in the future. And if you're feeling particularly generous, consider buying me a coffee at the link in the description to keep me caffeinated as I work on more of these builds. Also, don't forget to check out the channel's 5K subscriber giveaway, link in the description, so you can enter for your chance to win a completed Dina Soul Steeper deck and some nice unlockable upgrades before the deadline on July 31st. Additionally, be sure to stick around until the end of the video to see who won last week's poll and what commanders you'll be voting on for an upcoming episode. So, with that out of the way, let's start by taking a look at the commander and playstyle. Burakos Party Leader is a 2/4 orc that costs 3 and a black with the following abilities. Burakos Party Leader is also a cleric, rogue, warrior, and wizard. Whenever Burakos attacks, the defending player loses X life and we create X treasure tokens, where X is the number of creatures in our party. Choose a background. And the background we'll be choosing will be Folk Hero, which costs 1 and a white and gives our commander the following ability. Whenever we cast a spell that shares a creature type with this creature, draw a card. This ability only triggers once each turn. Examining our commander first, we can see that Burakos is sporting a mid-size CMC, a somewhat low stat block for his cost, and a pair of party-focused abilities that allow him to be a flex pick for our party comp and tacking on some solid burn and ramp that scales with our party size. Going more in depth into his first ability, while it is quite simple, it does make Burakos quite possibly the most flexible out of all the party commanders for the sheer ease of completing a full party. Party-themed builds, after all, have access to a solid number of payoffs that only get better as we assemble a full party, so having access to any party member we may need to complete a full party from the command zone is a great way to get extra value from these effects. This then works perfectly with our chosen background, which in combination with this ability effectively turns the first party member we cast each turn into a cantrip for a measly 2 mana, giving us a cheap and easy to trigger source of card advantage that we have access to right from the command zone to ensure we keep our hands nice and full as we assemble our party. Then looking at his last ability, it serves as a decent party payoff that scales depending on the size of the party, but does require some hoops to jump through to get online, as our commander has to attack to trigger this and his low stat block and lack of evasion doesn't make him surviving that attack very likely. The prospect of up to 4 treasures and extra damage each turn isn't terrible, however, and we can certainly put it to use if we can engineer ways for our commander to attack safely. So, as we can see, Burakos and the Folk Hero background combine to make a party-focused value machine, providing both ramp and draw for any party-themed build to thrive under, making the potential builds featuring them as flexible as Burakos himself. And while there are a multitude of different directions that this build could be taken in, I ultimately settled on a life gain and life loss build, building upon our commander's own life loss effect to drain our opponent's life totals dry while padding our own. And luckily for us, party-focused builds in our colors have plenty of members that are well suited for this playstyle, ranging from clerics who can gain us life or weaponize that life gain, rogues who can continuously drain the board or pile on the life loss, warriors who can drain the board as we gain life or use the treasures our commander creates, and even wizards who can further weaponize our life gain by turning it into damage or card advantage. But it just won't be life gain we'll be running, as we'll need to make sure our commander is able to safely attack in to generate treasure tokens for us and pile on the damage even further. So we'll be running a decent number of ways to make our commander evasive so he can safely get in for damage and proc his abilities. And finally, since our build will be primarily party focused to get the most out of our commander and background, meaning we'll be lacking some non-party life gain payoffs that other builds may have access to, we'll be running a solid number of tutors to help out the deck's consistency, so we always have access to our party members, life gain payoffs, or anything else we may need at any given time. So, with that covered, let's let Burakos get to work, as he and his group of hardened adventurers have a quest to complete for us. Sure, they may not be as flashy as some other adventurers, but their results do speak for themselves. Just don't ask too many questions and pay in full upon completion and this job will be as good as done, meaning we'll have 3 less planeswalkers to worry about shortly. So, now that we know a bit more about the commander and playstyle, let's start looking at the deck itself by starting with the creatures. Starting off in the CMC1 slot, we have the Soul Sisters, Soul Warden, and Soul Attendant, both of which are 1/1s that, whenever another creature ETBs, gain us 1 life, making them very cheap and effective sources of repeatable life gain to both pad our life totals and proc our life gain payoffs as both we and our opponents build up our boards. We'll also be running the slightly less powerful Lunarch Veteran, another 1/1 that gains us a life only when another creature ETBs under our control and we can disturb for 1 and a white. transforming into Luminous Phantom, a 1/1 flyer that gains us a life whenever another creature we control leaves the battlefield. Not gaining us as much life as the Soul Sisters before it, but still doing a respectable job on both its faces that works well with our large creature base. Then we close out this slot with Mother of Runes, yet another 1/1 we can tap to give target creature we control protection from a color of our choice until end of turn, making it a solid way to both keep our commander alive through removal and safely attack in thanks to its on-demand protection. Moving on to the CMC2 slot, we have some more sources of life gain joining our ranks with Suture Priest and Impassioned Orator. Suture Priest is a 1/1 that, whenever a creature ETBs under our control, gains us 1 life, and whenever a creature ETBs under our opponent's control, has them lose 1 life, providing us with another repeatable source of life gain as we assemble our party that also passively whittles down our opponent's life totals while they build up their boards. Impassioned Orator is a 2/2 that also gains us a life whenever a creature ETBs under our control, giving us yet another simple but easy to enable source of life gain that our payoffs will be able to put to good use. Syndic of Tides and Malakir Bloodpriest then join us as a pair of life drain sources, the former being a 2/2 with Extort to allow us to tack on an AoE drain to every single one of our spells for only a single mana, and the latter being a 2/1 that, when it ETBs, has each opponent lose 1 life for each member in our party, making them both good life drain sources that make use of our excess mana in our party theme to become even better. Zulaport Cutthroat then gets slotted in as another source of AoE drain, being a 1/1 that, whenever a creature we control dies, has each opponent lose 1 life while we gain 1 life, punishing our opponents for every creature we lose to widen our life difference even more. Vizkopa Guildmage then joins us as another source of life gain that's also a powerful life gain payoff, being a 2/2 that we can pay 1 a white and a black to either give target creature lifelink until end of turn, or have each opponent lose life equal to the amount of life we gain until end of turn. Its first ability working nicely with some of our bigger creatures to give us some extra life, and its second ability being a terrifying life gain payoff that will allow us to chew through our opponent's life points very quickly, especially since we can use it multiple times a turn to multiply its life loss even further. Then we have a trio of party members that can make use of our life gain with Voice of the Blessed, Keen Duelist, and Tenacious Underdog. Voice of the Blessed is a 2/2 that, whenever we gain life, puts a +1/+1 counter on itself, gaining Flying and Vigilance once it has 4+ counters and becoming indestructible once it has 10+, taking full advantage of our multiple sources of life gain to become a massive, evasive, and resilient threat very quickly and easily. Keen Duelist is another 2/2 that, on our upkeep, has us and target opponent reveal a top card from our deck, each losing life equal to the CMC of the card revealed by the other player, then putting that card into our hands, making it a cheap body to drop early and effectively giving us an extra draw per turn whose life loss isn't too bad for us thanks to our life gain, but does affect our opponents much more significantly. Tenacious Underdog is a 3/2 with Blitz for 2 double black and paying 2 life that we can cast from our graveyard for its Blitz cost, giving us an easy to recur party member from the bin to proc Folk Hero for the draw, our creature ETB life gain effects, and then draw us an additional card when it dies at the end of the turn. And finally, we close out this slot with Selfless Spirit and Mindblade Render. Selfless Spirit is a 2/1 flyer we can sack to give all creatures we control indestructible until end of turn, providing us a cheap means to protect our board against wipes, and keeping our life gain and life gain payoff sources on bodies intact. Mindblade Render is a 1/3 that, whenever our opponents are dealt combat damage by a warrior, has us draw a card and lose a life, working nicely alongside our naturally evasive warriors and means to give our other creatures evasion to reliably reload our hands. Reaching the CMC3 slot, we have some more sources of life drain joining our ranks with Adrana's Emissary and Nadir's Nightblade, the former being a 2/2 flyer that has each opponent lose 1 life while we gain 1 life on our upkeep, and the latter being a 1/3 that does the same but whenever a token we control leaves the battlefield instead, giving us even more ways to heal ourselves while harming the rest of the table, with the latter synergizing particularly well with our commander's treasure creation to siphon a potentially huge amount of life from our opponents as we use that treasure for mana. A trio of lifelinkers are then up next with Extraction Specialist, Markov Purifier, and Nighthawk Scavenger. Extraction Specialist is a 3/2 lifelinker that, when it ETBs, returns a creature of CMC 2 or less from our graveyard onto the battlefield, preventing it from attacking or blocking so long as we control Extraction Specialist. It's decent power and lifelink, working nicely with our evasion sources to pad our life total safely, while also allowing us to reanimate our lower cost life gain sources and payoffs if they're dealt with. Markov Purifier is a 2/3 lifelinker that, on our end step if we gain life that turn, lets us pay 2 to draw a card, making it a decent source of repeatable card advantage considering our life gain heavy build. Nighthawk Scavenger is a 1/3 with Flying, Death Touch, and Lifelink whose power is equal to 1+ the number of different card types in our opponent's graveyards. Its multiple keywords making it good as a blocker if dropped early, as well as a solid source of evasive life gain as our opponent's graveyards start to fill up. Then we have a trio of Vampire life gain payoff slotting in with Bloodthirsty Aerialist, Marauding Blight Priest, and Veto Thorn of the Dusk Rose. Bloodthirsty Aerialist is a 2/3 flyer that gains a +1/+1 counter whenever we gain life, providing us with another ever-growing evasive threat that works perfectly with our life gain playstyle. Marauding Blight Priest is a 3/2 that, whenever we gain life, has each opponent lose 1 life, turning all our life gain into life drain to siphon away our opponent's life even faster. Veto Thorn of the Dusk Rose is a 1/3 that, whenever we gain life, has target opponent lose that much life, and lets us pay 3 and double black to give all our creatures lifelink until the end of the turn, making him a Sanguine Bond on legs to weaponize our life gain, while also providing all our creatures with access to lifelink to enable his life loss even better. Moving away from life focus entries and onto generically good party members, we start off with the card advantage sources Harper Recruiter, Grim Haruspex, and Morbid Opportunist. Harper Recruiter is a 3/1 flyer that, whenever it attacks, has us look at the top 4 cards of our deck and lets us reveal up to 1 party member of each type and put that card into our hands, putting the rest of the cards at the bottom of our deck in a random order. It's built-in evasion, making it relatively easy to proc its ability, and our high volume of party members ensuring it will usually net us at least 1 card per swing. Grim Haruspex and Morbid Opportunist both let us draw cards as creatures die off, the former being a 3/2 with more for a black that triggers whenever a creature we control dies, and the latter being a 1/3 that triggers when any creature dies but only once per turn, both serving as solid sources of repeatable card advantage as both our and our opponent's creatures get removed. Then we have another pair of card advantage sources joining us with Rumor Gatherer and Nalia de Arnis. Rumor Gatherer is a 2/1 that, whenever a creature ETBs under our control, lets us scry 1 or instead draw 1 if it's the second time this ability procced this turn, taking advantage of our relatively high creature base as both a repeatable source of card selection and card advantage. Nalia de Arnis is a 3/3 that always allows us to look at the top card of our deck, allowing us to play party members from the top of it, and, on our combat phase if we have a full party, distributes a +1/+1 counter to all creatures we control as well as granting them death touch until the end of the turn, making her a powerful party payoff thanks to her party-focused future sight and ability to power up our entire board turn after turn once we have the full party assembled. The legend Varagoth Bloodsky then also joins our ranks, being a 2/3 Death Toucher with Boast for 1 and a black, allowing target player to search their deck for any card and put it on top, effectively making him a repeatable vampiric tutor we can get in safely thanks to our evasion sources and, along with Folk Hero, lets us draw the card we tutor for on the same turn as long as we cast a party member on our main 2. Then we close out this slot with Undercity Scrounger, a 1/4 we can tap to create a treasure but only if a creature died that turn, providing us with another party member with a decent defensive body to intercept attacks for us, and whose treasure generation can be put to use to help us pay for extort costs or the activated abilities of our payoffs. Closing in on the end now, the first half of the CMC4 slot brings us some more life gain focus cards with Cliffhaven Vampire and Syndicate Enforcer. Cliffhaven Vampire is a 2/4 flyer that, whenever we gain life, has each opponent lose 1 life, making it another evasive copy of Marauding Blight Priest to help us siphon our opponent's life totals even faster. Syndicate Enforcer is a 3/2 with Extort, making it another party-themed extort source to tack on some AoE drain to all our spells while making our commander and background more effective. Then the latter half of this slot brings us some more generically good party members with Seasoned Dungeoneer and Grim Hireling. Seasoned Dungeoneer is a 3/4 that, when it ETBs, gives us the initiative and, whenever we attack, gives target party member protection from creatures and lets it explore. Its introduction of the initiative into the game being very good for us to get additional value, while its offensive protection allows us to safely swing in with our commander and lifelinkers to proc their abilities and even potentially drawing us cards or growing them as they do so. Grim Hireling is a 3/2 that, whenever 1 or more creatures we control deal combat damage to a player, creates 2 treasure tokens, and lets us pay a black and sack X treasures to give target creature -X/-X until end of turn at sorcery speed, serving as another source of treasure generation to supplement our commanders, as well as a means to turn our treasures into non-destruction based removal to deal with otherwise problematic threats. And finally, skipping to the CMC6 slot, we have our last 2 creatures with Pontiff of Blight and Asterion the Decadent. Pontiff of Blight is a 2/7 with Extort that gives all other creatures we control Extort as well, turning our entire creature base into AoE drain sources as we cast our spells that can easily be fueled thanks to our commander's treasure generation. Asterion is a 4/4 with Death Touch and Lifelink that, on our end step, either has target opponents lose life equal to the amount of life they lost that turn, or has us gain life equal to the amount of life we gained that turn. Both modes being very useful to us by doubling up on our healing or damage output on a turn-by-turn basis depending on what we need. That covers all our creatures, so let's move on to our instance. Starting off in the CMC1 slot, we have its only entrant with Swords to Plowshares, which exiles target creature and has its controller gain life equal to its power, making it a dirt cheap source of exile-based removal that's still very much worth running despite its downsides. The CMC2 slot then brings us even more exile-based removal with Despark, Contraband Livestock, and Dire Tactics. The first exiling target permanent of CMC4+, the second exiling target creature and giving its controller either a 0/1, 2/2, or 4/4 depending on a d20 result, and the last also exiling target creature and costing us life equal to its CMC if we don't control a human, all serving as additional cheap non-destruction based removal that we can use to bring down particularly resilient targets. Fracture then closes out this slot, which destroys target artifact, enchantment, or planeswalker, its flexibility and low cost enabling us to deal with a wide variety of back row threats very efficiently. The CMC3 slot then brings us our last two instants with Generous Gift and Crib Swap. Generous Gift destroys target permanent and gives its controller a 3/3 to replace it, making it our most flexible removal option that can deal with almost any type of permanent threat we may encounter. Crib Swap exiles target creature and gives its controller a 1/1 to replace it while also having Changeling, serving as another exile removal effect and actually drawing us a card with our background since it's considered a party member when we cast it to make it even better. That covers all our instants, so let's move on to our sorceries. It's going to be a whole lot of tutors in this category, starting in the CMC0 slot with Profane Tutor, which must be cast for its suspend cost of 1 and a black and has a search our deck for any card, and put that card into our hand. It's very low cost, making up for its slow speed, allowing us to drop it very early to bring up our life gain sources and payoffs instead of hoping to draw into them. Then skipping all the way to the CMC4 slot, we have another pair of tutors with Diabolic Tutor and Mastermind's Acquisition, both of which again put any card from our deck directly into our hand to improve our deck's consistency even further. The CMC5 slot then brings us our last pair of tutors with Coveted Prize and Increasing Ambition, which again tutor any card from our deck directly into our hand, the former costing 1 less for each type of party member we have in play and letting us cast a CMC4 or less spell for free if we have a full party, and the latter having Flashback for 7 and a black and, if cast from our graveyard, searches up 2 cards instead, each having decent upside to make them worth their increased cost while again making our deck much more consistent. Then we wrap up this slot with a board wipe Stick Together, which has each player choose a party from among creatures they control, then sack the rest, making it a party-themed non-destruction based way to level our opponent's boards while leaving at least some of our creatures untouched after the dust settles. And finally, reaching the CMC6 slot, we have our last sorcery with Austere Command, which has us choose 2 of the following options to destroy: all artifacts, all enchantments, all CMC3 or less creatures, and or all CMC4 plus creatures, providing us with a very customizable wipe that we can custom tailor to inflict maximum damage to our opponents while shielding ourselves from the worst of it. That covers all our sorceries, so let's move on to our enchantments. Starting in the CMC1 slot, we have its sole entry with Cleric class, a class which at level 1 gains us an additional life whenever we would gain life, at level 2, which costs 3 and a white, puts a +1/+1 counter on target creature we control whenever we gain life, and at level 3, which costs 4 and a white, lets us return our creature from our graveyard onto the battlefield and gain life equal to its toughness. Its first 2 levels making it a potent life gain payoff to both increase our life gain and pump our creatures as we gain life, while its level 3 is nice to have in our back pocket to reanimate one of our payoffs if they happen to be dealt with. Then skipping to the CMC5 slot, we have our last 2 enchantments with Life Insurance and Sanguine Bond. Life Insurance has Extort, and whenever a creature dies, has us lose a life and create a treasure, giving us a back row source of Extort that's a bit harder for our opponents to deal with, and a means to create more treasures as creatures die off at the cost of life, which we have in abundance anyway. Sanguine Bond, whenever we gain life, has target opponent lose that much life, providing us with yet another means to turn our substantial life gain into damage to help us close out games. That covers all our enchantments, so let's move on to our artifacts. Sol Ring and Wayfarer's Bauble start us off in the CMC1 slot, the former tapping for 2 and the latter letting us pay 2, tap it and sack it to put a basic land from our deck into play tapped, both serving as cheap and efficient means to speed up our mana base. Multi-class Baldric then closes out this slot, an equipment that equips for 1 and gives the equipped creature a keyword depending on which party members we have in play. Lifelink for clerics, Death Touch for rogues, haste for warriors, and flying for wizards, as well as preventing all damage to the equipped creature if we have a full party, making it a decent party payoff that fits with our game plan by providing us easy access to evasion and life gain. The CMC2 slot then brings us a wave of mana rocks to help speed up our mana base even further, starting off with Arcane Signet, which taps for any color in our commander's color identity, Orzhov Signet, which we can pay 1 and tap for both our colors, Talisman of Hierarchy, which taps for either a colorless or either of our colors if we take a damage, and Mind Stone, which taps for a colorless and we can pay 1, tap it and sack it to draw a card, all providing us with cheap sources of mana to help grow our mana base even faster. Then we wrap up this slot with Swiftfoot Boots, an equipment that equips for 1 and gives the equipped creature hexproof and haste, making it an easy way to protect our commander and other life gain sources and or payoffs from our opponent's attempts to remove them. And finally, reaching the CMC3 slot, we have our last pair of artifacts, those being Bantu's Monument and Whispersilk Cloak. Bantu's Monument reduces the cost of all our black creature spells by 1 and, whenever we cast a creature spell, has each opponent lose 1 life while we gain 1 life, both ramping us with its cost reduction and giving us another source of AoE life drain that takes advantage of our creature-heavy deck. Whispersilk Cloak is an equipment that equips for 2, grants the equipped creature Shroud, and makes it unblockable, working nicely as both a source of protection and evasion to give to our commander so he can safely get in to proc his effects and dodge removal. That covers all our artifacts, and with no planeswalkers to cover, let's move straight into our land base. Starting with our mana lands, we have Command Tower, which taps for any color in our commander's color identity, Caves of Kolios, which taps for a colorless or either of our colors if we take a damage, Tainted Field, which taps for a colorless or either of our colors if we control a swamp, Shine Shadow Snarl, which comes into play tapped unless we reveal a plains or a swamp and taps for either of our colors, Path of Ancestry, which comes into play tapped, taps for any color in our commander's color identity, and scries 1 if that mana is used to cast a creature of a type matching our commander's, Temple of Silence, which comes into play tapped, taps for either our colors and scries 1 when it ETBs, Myriad Landscape, which comes into play tapped, taps for a colorless and we can pay 2, tap it and sack it to put 2 of the same basic land from our deck into play tapped, and finally Obscura Storefront and Evolving Wilds, both of which we can tap and sack to put a basic land from our deck into play tapped, the former doing so as soon as it ETBs and gaining us a life, and the latter allowing us to do so whenever we choose. Moving on to our utility lands, Castle Locthwain and War Room start us off as a pair of card draw sources, the former coming into play tapped unless we control a swamp, tapping for a black, and letting us pay 1, double black and tap it to draw a card, then take damage equal to the number of cards we have in hand, while the latter taps for a colorless and lets us pay 3, tap it and pay life equal to the colors in our commander's color identity to draw a card instead, both serving as ways to generate card advantage from our land slots, whose life loss isn't too impactful since we have more than enough life gain to make up for it. Rogue's Passage and Access Tunnel then also get slotted in, both tapping for a colorless and making target creature unblockable until end of turn, the former requiring us to pay 4 and tap it to do this for any target, and the latter only costing us 3 and tapping it to do this but being limited to power 3 or less creatures, giving us even more means to grant our commander evasion, this time from the land slot, to allow him to attack in safely to proc his life loss and treasure creation. Then Vault of the Archangel closes out our utility lands, which taps for a colorless and lets us pay 2, a white, a black, and tap it to give all creatures we control Death Touch and Lifelink until the end of the turn, making it a hard to interact with way to turn our entire board into potential life gain to pad our life totals and proc our payoffs. And finally, we're running 11 plains and 10 swamps as our basics to close out our land base. So, now that we've covered all the cards in the deck, let's take a look at this deck's breakdown. This deck currently has 37 creatures including the commander, 7 instants, 7 sorceries, 4 enchantments including the background, 10 artifacts, 0 planeswalkers, and 35 lands. Looking at the stats that matter to our game plan, we have 37 cards that are considered party members, 8 cards that care about the party, 22 sources of life gain, 17 sources of life loss, 10 cards that care about life gain, 6 cards that grant evasion, and 6 tutors. leaving us with a substantial amount of party members to empower our commander and proc our background alongside some additional payoffs for them, a decent number of ways to pad our life totals while draining our opponents, and additional ways to take advantage of that life gain, in addition to a handful of ways to grant our commander evasion so they can more easily get in for damage and proc their effects, and tutors to make our deck more consistent. For general deck stats, we have 12 ramp sources, 11 card draw sources, 8 targeted removal sources, and 2 board wipes. Our removal being slightly lower than normal due to our ability to easily search up for it whenever needed with our tutors, and our other stats falling within more normal parameters. Looking at our mana curve, we have 1 0-drop, 9 1-drops, 21 2-drops, 19 3-drops, 7 4-drops, 5 5-drops, and 3 6-drops, leaving us with a fairly aggressive curve that aims to drop our background and commander early to get value out of them as we assemble our party and start gaining and draining life as soon as possible. Currently, this deck is valued at $63.54, not counting the price of basic lands or shipping. This price was calculated by using the cheapest listed marketplace price on TCG Player at the time of this recording. For side grades, Sorin Vengeful Bloodlord can be considered as an additional source of AoE lifelink for our board to provide us with even more life gain. Scion of the Swarm would serve as another ever-growing threat as we continue to gain life, and Cosmos Elixir and Well of Lost Dreams can provide our build with even more draw that takes advantage of our high life totals and life gain respectively. For upgrades, Giver of Runes would make for another great source of evasion and protection thanks to its repeatable on-demand protection to any creature who may need it. Blind Obedience is an excellent source of extort that also slows down our opponent significantly as a bonus. Authority of the Consuls is another great source of life gain that provides us with a substantial amount of life as our opponents build up their boards. And Heliod Sun Crown makes for a powerful and resilient life gain payoff that grows our creatures alongside our life totals. And lastly, the Meathook Massacre would make a superb addition as both a powerful non-destruction based wipe and a source of life gain and life loss as both our opponents and our creatures die off, provided we're willing to pay the hefty fee this butcher will charge for their services. Thanks everyone for sticking around until the end of the video. Firstly, I would like to thank everyone who's been participating in the channel's 5K giveaway and helping the channel reach its 5.4K milestone. And if you haven't done so already, please check out the link in the description on how to enter to win a copy of the Dina Soulsteeper build featured on this channel, and unlock upgrades for it by subscribing. Then taking a look at the results of our latest poll, it looks like Miram Sentinel Worm was able to claim the top spot, so look forward to a dragon cloning build featuring her next week. Then moving on to this week's poll, we have a fresh batch of contenders ready to fight it out for the top spot, with this week's selection featuring Jaxus the Troublemaker, Zevlor Elturel Exile, and Wilson Refined Grizzly with a background of my choice. Please cast your vote in the community tab, link in the description, and let me know in the comments who you voted for and what commanders you want to see from Streets of New Capenna or Battle for Baldur's Gate on future polls. Before we close out, again, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't done so already, as this channel cannot grow without your support. And if you feel like showing your thanks by keeping me caffeinated while I make these videos, please consider buying me a coffee at the link in the description. Speaking of which, I'd like to thank Jason D.S. Stanley for their generous donation. Thanks for the coffee, Jason, and thanks for supporting the channel. And if any of you would like to support the channel in a different way, feel free to check out the other deck techs floating around my head if you'd like to see the latest builds, or click on the link above for a playlist of all the Cut Rate Commander episodes I've made so far. And with that, have a good one folks, and stay safe.